About a month ago, we received a gift that is probably one of the most significant gifts that we've received in a long time from a couple who live in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, James Clarence and Mary Grissett Holland, who are scholars, collectors, and in many ways philanthropists. One of their collections is graphic depictions of the surrender at Appomattox, which of course this Thursday, April 9th, marks the 150th anniversary of that surrender. This collection is really phenomenal in many ways. It's 29 pieces total. It is engravings by and large. There are 2 original pieces in the collection as well. There's an amazing amount of visual allegory here. You'll see, in this particular one, you'll see the troops behind Grant all lined out, and here is clear evidence of the overwhelming resources that were available to the Union Army. And you'll see behind Lee somewhat less organized and bedraggled troops. Here's another example that's even probably more dramatic, because you see behind Ulysses S. Grant there, you'll see what looks like, to me, I always think it looks like the Roman troops marching into take over, but they're very organized and and go way off into the distance, and then Lee's troops are somewhat bedraggled, as they would have been. Here even, this is even more dramatic. I mean, here is the Alpha and the Omega, which is bizarre when you think about that kind of depiction. What's nice about this is its color. It's also shows the firing on Sumter, but then it shows Lee and Grant in somewhat fashionable attire. General Lee looks like a cavalier in that one. This is one of the 2 originals. This is an original pen and ink drawing of Appomattox Village, which is exceedingly rare. The courthouse itself at Appomattox burned in 1892, so that its depiction here is one of the few that we have. But then inside the McLean house, the actual meeting, the actual surrender, there's lots of sort of myth about what actually happened there. There are several here that are fairly correct. They probably would not have been at the same table. In fact, I think it's unlikely. There were clearly 2 tables. This is the Courier and Ives, and most of these engravings range anywhere from 1865 to the day of the surrender to much later, even into the 1880s depiction, because this was a pivotal moment, and so it kept being repeated. Here is probably what would be, or close to what would have been an accurate scene inside the McLean house. Although it's not clear, and it's probably wouldn't have been quite so obvious that Lee had his back to Grant. They may have been at 2 tables, but this is sort of in many ways a bit of an affront, I think. Here are smaller images where you see them you see them at 2 tables, but they are actually side by side. They're not. One doesn't have his back to the other. As you can tell, there's a huge amount of symbolism and allegory here. This piece from the Holland collection is probably the most important in terms of its value and its significance historically. This is an original watercolor done by Benjamin West Kleindienst, who is probably better known for his mural of the charge at Newmarket, which hangs in BMI's Jackson Hall. It is the depiction of Lee and Grant at the table, at the surrender table, going over the terms of surrender. One of the more compelling figures in here, other than Lee, is also Colonel Charles Marshall, who was General Lee's aide-de-camp. He's the only other Confederate in this who's depicted in this. And Marshall's, it was Marshall's biography, or Marshall's reminiscences later, that told the story of this meeting. Colonel Porter, who was Grant's aide-de-camp, who is probably this man here, wrote a similar memoir which described this meeting as well. And it was this piece, this original watercolor, that was done for Colonel Porter's book. And it's, of course, it was done in 1897. I think it's also important to point out that even though the Northern press attempted to show and celebrate the Union victory, it is in most cases Robert E. Lee who comes out looking much the better in terms of his facial expressions. Lee is always depicted as being thoughtful and dignified in his submission to the inevitable.